Welcome back to the Rural Roundup. This show is produced in association with the Scottish Government. On today's episode, we're joined by David Eadie, a forestry consultant with SAC, and he's going to talk to us all about anything woodland, some of the grants, some of the management, and also tell us about some of the do's and don'ts. Tiffany, how are things with you down in the borders?
Everything's great down here in the borders. I think farmers are happier because we've definitely all had a little bit of rain, which people were beginning to cry out for. And as we're recording this, we're just about to all go to Scotch Sheep. But when anyone's listening to this, Scotch Sheep will have been and gone. How's things up there in Aberdeenshire, George?
Well, weather-wise, quite frankly, your guess is as good as mine what the weather will be like today. It's we've had sun, we've had warmth, we've had rain, thunder and lightning, thunder plumps. You name it, we've had it the last couple of weeks. What I will say is, though, the moisture was and the warmth, it's meant that we've had some super growth in a lot of the crops. A lot of the silage crops, you see that they've really fleshed out. The spring barleys, when you're wandering through them, there is a terrific leaf now formed. Same with the wheats. So the rain was needed, and the crops are obviously finding more nutrients now. And there's some really nice looking crops out there.
It's amazing how quickly things can change with that little bit of rain and a few sunny days. And it's just as if it never happened, all the people crying out for rain and drought and concerns about that.
Yeah, but it always comes with the caveat that it can stop now, and let's get back to some nice sunny weather again.
I think we all need a crystal ball to try and figure out what the weather's going to do, because it can't make up its mind. It's just lovely Scottish weather.
Yeah, it's just a Scottish summer. You mentioned Scotch Sheep. It would be amiss to say that the Royal Highland Show isn't far away either. There'll be a lot of listeners, I'm sure, be going along there.
It's always definitely a good day out. I'm hoping the weather forecast decides it's on a sunny couple of days for the Highland Show, but I'm sure if it rains, everyone will survive. But it's what a good excuse to get out, go and see people, bump into probably your neighbours that you've not seen in a while because you've not made it off farm, and many other people across the country. So it's such a good social event.
Yeah, and of course it showcases all the best things that's about Scottish agriculture, whether it's machinery and such like, or the livestock, and of course there's also a big input in terms of food products and such like nowadays as well.
It's definitely a great excuse to get off farm, because I know following lambing and calving and then people are onto silage, it can often feel like you can't get off farm because there's too much work to do. But being such a big event, it's just a great excuse to get off farm and go and be a bit more sociable for a change.
A lot of events coming off as well. Soon we've got crops trial nights. I know that certainly down in Edinburgh, up at beside Inverurie as well. They're coming up towards the end of June. If you check out the FAS website for more details there. And there's various meetings and that coming off around the country as well.
Definitely plenty going on. And then after the Highland Show, there is plenty of other local shows happening as well. So it's great to get out and about to those as well.
A couple of important deadlines coming off. EECS is not far away, the deadline there. 29th of June is a cut-off point for most applications.
So those are for most applications, but it's a 31st of July deadline if it's just a standalone organic deadline. If you're wanting to apply for organics as well as another option, then that's back to the 29th of June. So it's only for organic only option for the 31st of July.
And of course, FFIS, which I think we mention in every episode, FFIS deadline for uploading evidence. That'll be 9 months after you got your contract offer. So in most cases, that's going to be wearing towards the end of July.
I would definitely rather remind people too many times than not enough times, because we don't want people having to pay back the grant money.
No, it's important. If you haven't done so already, check out that contract, make sure you order or you have got delivered what you're supposed to be getting funding for. Make sure you've paid it. Make sure you've got your ducks in a row in terms of invoices, payment evidence, and remember you need to get those geotagged photographs as well.
I think it's also worth noting that don't just leave it till the very last minute. The application for submitting all your evidence, it does take a little bit longer than your initial application, which you put in. You need to go and add in a few bits of text to say how it's benefited you and your farm as well. So don't leave it to the last minute. If you've got the item already, just get it done and then it's out the way and you don't need to worry about it again.
That's right, Tiffany. It's not just as simple as uploading the bank statements or whatever. It does take a minute to write in your little spiel about how it's benefiting your business, and then also what it's going to do for some of the key categories that they were looking for in the application.
I think the other thing we probably should mention is football. Everybody's talking about it. I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've ever watched a football match in my entire life.
Well, I've got a daughter who is absolutely football daft. She watches with her dad on the TV, but she plays football with our team, Bucking Girls, blacks and whites, and so she's absolutely dedicated to her football. So she's really excited at the moment. She's been getting some of the memorabilia and things like that already. It kicks off the end of this week as we're recording. By the time this goes out, we will have an idea how Scotland is doing. But as always with sporting events, it tends to pull the country together. It's what people speak about when they're out and about. Hopefully Scotland do well, of course. And Andy Robertson and the boys will take home the trophy in a month or so time. But we'll live in hope. But sport also plays a role in farming. Whether it is football, whether it is rugby, you go back before your time, Tiffany, but you go back 30, 35 years and there were Borders farmers, John Jeffrey and such like playing for Scotland rugby team. There were members of the grain trade playing for the Scotland rugby team and such like. And it linked that. And still there are a lot of links, a lot of farmers, they still play rugby. It's good for them. It's part of it. I know when I was working for a grain company down in Angus, there was a big guy who's probably too old to be playing football, should be playing rugby, should have had more sense, but he seemed to take great enjoyment getting down, playing rugby every Saturday. I can't remember him handling the ball much. I think he just liked going and picking up and throwing about the opposition, to be quite honest with you. That was his enjoyment, but it was good for him. Got him out, seeing folk, the banter and such like. Whether it's golf, curling, a lot of farmers play curling. Sport, it's good for your mental health, it's good for your fitness, and it's something that a lot of people speak about and they get involved with.
Yeah, I might not be able to get behind football, but I can definitely get behind rugby. It's definitely a big thing down here in the Borders. I don't know if you've noticed, George, the RSABI have a Keepy Uppy challenge. What a great way to enjoy the football as well as thinking about your mental health.
Yeah, I did see it catch it. It was coming up on Facebook, and that was where they were doing it with their wellies on, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To keep you up with your wellies. So yeah, I think I would if I'd been doing it, I think I would probably have told my daughter to go and put on a pair of wellies, and she could do it rather than me embarrass myself on camera. But never mind. Yeah. And we're just talking here about team sports mostly, but there are other interests as well. And we're actually, you'll be like me, you'll be getting out on the farm just now. Just getting out and about into the fresh air. You're enjoying the countryside. Certainly when you're doing an eeks, you've got to know what's on the farm in terms of various habitats and such like. And a lot of that, you'll know as well as me, Tiffany, there's the crops on the land, what's on the land, the grass, the land cover, but also some of the habitats on the farm as well.
It's fantastic going out, seeing all the biodiversity, seeing the birds flying around. but also looking at what fantastic hedges people have been planting. I've been on farms where they've recently planted some new farm woodlands to create shelter for the livestock. And funnily enough, the older woodlands have also been very useful when a shower of rain comes down, trying to stand underneath the trees to have a bit of a shelter to avoid the downpour. Well, talking about all things trees, we're delighted to have David Eadie from SAC Consulting joining us today to give us the latest scoop on what is actually going on in the world of trees. Welcome, David. How are you getting on?
Not too bad, thanks.
So then, David, trees. There's a lot of trees and a lot of farms, but a lot of subsidies and that in the past have driven folk to make the most of all their land in terms of growing crops and that. Why should farmers think about planting more trees on their land? What benefits can they bring?
So, benefits, generally speaking, most of the farmers that come to me, they've already looked at identified areas that they're not using to the best advantages, or whether or not they want an area, they're trying to optimize their farm. So, for example, those banks that are very steep down to a burn, that are just more hassle than they're worth. I've had a few clients that are looking at basically removing all them out of the farm, so consolidating all their grazing into certain areas that are more manageable. You're looking at consolidation, you're looking at the fencing with the helping of managing the cattle. Long term, you're looking at potential shelter, but you're looking at sort of 10 years plus down the line. You're looking at very far in advance. But most of the clients that come to me, they're looking at areas that they're not maximising. They're of little use. I've got a few clients that want just to plant the whole farm. Their children are not interested in farming, but they want to stay in the house. They keep a few fields near the steading, potentially to have a bit of livestock, but they plant the rest of the farm. And that's another option, but it just depends on how it all stacks up for the client.
So, the Farm Advisory Service has various specialist plans which farmers can apply for. Am I right in thinking there is one for Woodland, David?
Yes, Tiffany. Yeah, there's one available. It provides you with £1,600 free advice plus VAT. And it can be on a range of things, such as I had a recent client purchase a woodland, and it's 15 years old and he's wondering what to do with it, to another client looking at, they fell the woodland and they're wanting to look at options of restocking. Do they have to restock to this same species as the felling permission? And then others that are looking at woodland creation and looking at pricing up how the grant applications would satisfy them going forward for woodland creation. So there's a range of options available. You just need to have somebody in mind to complete it for you.
Sounds like there's lots of different options available because we've talked on the podcast about the grant schemes, we've talked about failing licenses. So, actually being able to get somebody to come around and offer some advice, and whether it's an existing one or something they're thinking about doing, I think that sounds like a great thing for people to be doing.
It's a great starting point, particularly when somebody can actually come out and have a closer look at what's you're looking for, instead of just having a conversation over the phone. Because a lot of the sites can be quite variable in nature, so it's hard to know until you actually get on the ground and walk through it to see what it's like.
Well, it's definitely worth people going and having a look there if they don't know what to do, and it just gives them a starting point. So many farmers are aware of the Scottish Government Forestry Grant Scheme, which has a variety of different options available, woodland creation being one of them. David, can you give an overview?
There's various grant schemes available at the moment. The main one is woodland creation, which gives you various options for tree planting. You've got from basically native broadleaves, farm woodlands, to productive broadleaves, to conifer and diverse conifer. Conifers mainly Sitka spruce with another species. Diverse conifer is any species other than Sitka spruce. Productive broadleaves are planted at basically your native broadleaves with a few extras. So you've got your oak, your beech, your Norway maple, sycamore, birch, cherry, and aspen. So they're planted at 2 metre centres, and then you're moving into your native broadleaves planted at 2.5 metre centres.
Tiffany said that she's fallen out of the loop. I don't think I was in a loop at all when it comes to forestry and woodland, to be quite honest with you, David. You're on about the grants here, and we've experienced with AICs and other schemes. They've been competitive. Is this competitive, or is it a different way of calculating?
It is competitive. It's done on a scoring basis. But unlike AICs, your scoring you already know. So once you hit that scoring criteria, that's it. Woodland creation, there's not a sort of single window to complete by, so it's accessible all the way through the year. Basically, the sort of process is you need to do an application. It needs to be submitted to Scottish Forestry. Scottish Forestry will look at it. It needs to go in the public register for 28 days. They'll then potentially come back for asking additional questions, and then potentially you'll get a contract. Contracts are for the capital items and the forestry grant, and then you'll have 5 years of maintenance grants, which are paid through. You've got two options with maintenance grants. You can actually pay it through your IAX application window in May every year, or there's another option where you can do it as a capital claim twice in the 5 years.
So what does the maintenance grant cover? What do people have to do for the ongoing 5 years?
It depends. Once it's all planted, it depends on the site conditions. Most of it is you'll always have a percentage of trees that just don't take for whatever, even with it drought. Just the trees just weren't planted right. The trees from the nursery weren't right. So you'll have to do what's called a beat up. So you'll beat up basically the dead ones. The other option is basically controlling competing vegetation. Is another option. Atypically, if it goes good in the first couple of years, then your establishment is a lot more cost effective. The other thing that is really important with planting woodland is herbivores. So making sure livestock's not in it at all, and then you've got your deer, your hares, your rabbits, and your voles that are issues.
It's interesting that you said competing vegetation. I've heard about larger forestry schemes that have gone ahead and the grass is out competing the trees, and people are having to go and cut the grass around the trees and in between the lines of trees as well. So it just shows you that they're not that competitive against some good quality grass on good land.
Depends. It's down to. I always try to get a taller tree. But for example, recent scheme I did, you're looking at a decent sort of. I always try to get a 40, 60 centimetre tall tree or thereabouts. But on a recent scheme I had to accept 20, 40 centimetre trees. And some of them were just hitting the 20 centimetre size. And when you're talking really small trees, then that's where vegetation causes a problem.
There is a big difference between 20 centimetre tree and a 60 centimetre tree. I can see that entirely.
But it depends on what the nurseries can produce.
Yeah.
And it's you can order trees the year before and wanting it a certain size, and it turns out that they didn't grow. The dry climate, the dry weather they had last year was really limiting. But then the crazy thing is some species respond to really late rain. There was an issue when it was a really dry season, I think 6 years ago. Everything really got stunted, and it was just all struggling. And then the rain came in September, and then the downy birch responded hugely well and just responded and shot up in growth. It's a fickle one, but it just depends on the site. There's so many variables. You try and make sure all the variables are as tight as possible, but it doesn't always happen.
If somebody is quite likes the idea maybe of sticking some trees in, what's the optimum site? If if they said to you, like, I'm wanting to plant some trees, where should I put them on my farm? What type of soil? That sort of thing.
Peat areas sort of greater than 500 millimeters are excluded. I would restrict areas that the soil depth is less than 200 millimeters. So you're basically going onto rock. There is sites where I've seen planted in the past where there is no soils and the trees have done fine. But yeah, so 200 millimeters sort of minimum. Mostly you'll have a species of tree and will grow in most soils and quite happily. It just depends. At the end of the day, I always ask a client where they want them. Because at the end of the day, they need to live with them for 20 years plus for the length of the contract. Some clients actually ask me where would you put them, and I said, well, I can advise, but at the end of the day, it's what you need for your farming business rather than for forestry's perspective.
You're saying living with it for 20 years plus. Am I not right in thinking that if you've got trees, you'll then need, and once they eventually get felled, you'll then need to put trees back in again? So it's quite a long-term option.
Potentially, yes. It depends on the scheme. If it's a broadleaf scheme, I would aim for thinning, just constantly thinning it, because they're more stable. They don't have the sail area that conifers have in the wintertime, so they don't tend to blow down as well. So they're a bit more flexible. But then, if from a farming perspective, if you've got livestock out in the middle of the wintertime, broadleaves are not going to give them much protection. So you need that conifer element. Ideally, yes, you do need to replant if it's a conifer percentage, and it's better to fell it before it falls over because your costs are considerably lower. If you were doing, your other option is to thin it, but it just thinning trees because they're planted at 2 metre centres makes sense in really good ground that's not exposed, but in your peatlands or peaty soils or wet soils, then I wouldn't recommend thinning it at all. Just because the risk of wind getting in and blowing it all over and mess. Felling permissions is what you would need to sort of fell over 5 calendar cube per calendar quarter, which is your big mature tree that sits in the middle of a field on its own is probably between 5 calendar cube or 10 calendar cube. So it sort of gives you a perspective of how much a 5 cube is. And then you can fell single trees with a felling permission or blocks of trees. It just depends on what you're doing, whether or not you place a tree for a single tree or a block. It's up to you.
We do seem to be having these storms almost annually now. We had Storm Arwen with several others since, and every single time there seems to be more and more trees blown down. Farmers simply just cannot go in and cut down just because they've maybe partly been blown down. There is a process they have to go through to get proper permissions, isn't there?
Yeah, so you need a felling permission. The only time you would be allowed to fell a tree is if it's dead, or it's within your 5 calendar cube per calendar quarter. The other thing is if the tree is under 10 centimetres diameter at 1.3 metres tall. So anything under 10 centimetres does not need a felling permission at 1.3 metres tall.
And is it quite straightforward to get this felling licenses?
Yes, it should be straightforward enough. You'll need to get an agent to do the felling permission for you, or you could potentially do it yourself with the help of Scottish Forestry's conservation conservatory.
There are also grants for harvesting and a lot of the other processes, infrastructure and such like as well. Is that right, David?
Yeah, so you've got a harvesting processing grant that's available. It has a closing date once a year on the 31st of January. The forest infrastructure one is sort of an ongoing one. But unfortunately the grant rates haven't really increased in the last 6-7 years, so the grant options are relatively low. The other options are for tree health. For example, you'll know about the larch disease that's affecting a lot. It's affecting more west coast of Scotland, where you'll go through blocks of woodland that's larch and it's been dead, completely dead in the summertime. So that's Pyrtother remorum. It's on the west coast. It's getting a lot worse, so it's a lot more plant health notices are being issued to farmers and landowners. There is grants available to deal with these if you so wish. The other option is, because it's a plant health notice, you don't actually need to replant the area, so you can just fell it all and leave it. But if you go down the grant route of the tree health, then it will need to be replanted.
For anybody, because there are farmers with bits and bobs of trees and woodlands around their farm. What are the signs?
The signs for larch disease is basically the canopy's dead. So you've got a standing dead tree. Usually the tree is on its own in a clump of existing larch, or it's all the larch are dead. You've also got another issue is Dendroctonus micans, a greater spruce bark beetle that's originally it was introduced into the docks near Liverpool in the 80s, and it's sort of gradually moved up, and it's now being seen along the central belt. The advantage of that is actually they identified in the 80s a biological control, Rhizomorph grandis, which is another beetle that actually kills the Dendroctonus micans beetles in the galleries in the tree, so it reduces the damage that's caused. Ash disease is another one that people well know about. It's ashes. They estimate 10% of the ash trees in the UK will be immune to it, but it's identifying those 10 trees. The future, there is a charity that's looking at the ash living legacy, which are looking at identifying those improved trees and eventually producing offspring so that they can go back into the world again. Ash trees are sort of split into 4 categories, depending on the amount of damage in the crown, and it depends on how close they are, proximity to roads or paths, whether or not what you would deal with them, what you would do with them. But you would just need to speak to a professional if you have a concern.
I've definitely noticed more ash trees that are looking well again. So they might fall into the category of the ones that are immune to it. Because I thought maybe there was less pressure or something had changed, but they could just be the immune trees. But it's nice to actually see some of them thriving.
It depends. Ash dieback, the disease itself will kill sort of smallish aged seedlings to about pole size trees on its own. When it's a mature tree, it weakens the tree, and then something like honey fungus or something comes in and completely just nails it. So you might be seeing trees that are sort of the droopiness branching, but they're still vigorous enough. It just depends. It's one of those interesting diseases that has a secondary infection coming in.
I'm sure people like you love studying them, and I'm sure the farmers are just thinking it's another dead tree and we're going to have to get it down before it's a hazard or falls on something.
Yeah, but then if there's no hazards underneath them, then they can just fall on their own.
Well, that's very true. Very true. Thanks, David. That's definitely refreshed my mind on what's going on in the forestry world, and hopefully listeners find that useful as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Rural Roundup. We'll see you back here on the 15th of July with our next episode. This episode was hosted by George Chalmers and Tiffany Stephenson and was produced by George Goley and edited by Cameron Waugh.
The Farm Advisory Service Podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business, and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.